Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Symptoms.wiki podcast. I'm Sean Moses, curator of Symptoms.wiki. Today, we have a very, very special guest, Dr. Gaétan Chevalier, an engineering physicist, professor, author, and research scientist in the fields of fusion and plasma physics, biophotons, biofield, and electrophysiology. Dr. Chevalier is currently on the research faculty at the CIHS. He's a visiting scholar in the Department of Family Medicine and Public Health in the School of Medicine at the University College San Diego, where he's also the director of the Earthing Institute and the research director at SciTech Labs. Dr. Chevalier, it's a real pleasure and honor to have you with us here. I heard about
Thank you.
earthing, some years ago in passing. But initially, when I had heard about earthing, I'd always attached the spiritual kind of connection with it. Then in late 2022, I started finding a number of incredibly well-researched papers on PubMed, and some of them, were by yourself, and some of them were research papers, so kind of academic style papers, and some of them were clinical style studies. So they laid out a very firm theoretical groundwork for earthing and a practical basis for incorporating it into the care of patients with chronic health conditions. And really, that's what we're here to talk about today. So, Professor Chevalier, what a pleasure to have you with us. I guess I'd be really grateful if you could just kind of explain your background in your own words. How did you find out about earthing? What was your process?
Yeah, well, first, thank you for having me. And I can start by saying that I was, after I graduated from University of Montreal, I started working in nuclear fusion in the only large tokamak machine in Canada. A tokamak is a nuclear fusion machine. We're not talking about fission, which is what the nuclear reactors that are now deployed worldwide are based upon, which is basically taking uranium and split it into smaller molecules, which is similar to having an atom bomb exploding slowly and controlling the energy of the explosion. That's why it's so difficult, and that's why there's many accidents possible. Nuclear fusion is the opposite. Is when you take very light molecules like hydrogen and helium. Actually, it's hydrogen, different isotopes of hydrogen that you fuse together, and you get helium, which is a laughing gas, and it does not produce nuclear radioactive waste that are dangerous for thousands of years. In fact, it's the process that the sun uses to produce energy, nuclear fusion. And that's why it's so difficult, because you need to reach the same temperature or similar temperature as those inside the sun. You need a minimum of 10 million degrees Celsius just to start the reaction.
Oh, wow.
So that tells you how difficult it is. So that was the field that I was in. And that brought me to, after my postdoc in Canada, I had a job. I found a position as a research scientist at UCLA, and again in nuclear fusion, in my job was to analyze the light coming out from the plasma. We can tell a lot of information from the light coming out of plasma. By the way, the sun is a big ball of plasma. So just by analyzing which frequencies are emitted in the light of the sun or any other, or a star, we can tell which elements are there or which molecules are in there, and we can even determine their concentration. So that was my job. But on the side, I always had been interested in spirituality, and I was, part in some spiritual groups. And so when we came to California, one of them called Transmission Meditation had the magazine, and they were talking about the work of a Shinto priest and parapsychologist and double PhD, Dr. Mutoyama. And I was fascinated by his way of doing research on chakras and meridians using a shielded room and photomultiplier tubes and all of this stuff like that. That was interesting. So I just wrote, there was an address, I just wrote to Japan. And to my surprise, I got a response that Dr. Mutoyama is coming to present, to do a lecture in Santa Monica, which is just close to UCLA. So I met the man and I told him that I am interested. And he just said to me, you know, I'm starting a new school in San Diego. So would you be able to teach electricity and magnetism? Because I have all these instruments, you know, some of them that he developed himself with a team of scientists in Japan. And I said, well, sure, I would be interested. And so I started teaching in San Diego, and for a year. And then he offered me a full-time job. I was like, you know, at the time that was like 1993. You know, research in integrative medicine and energy medicine was not so advanced. So it was more like, you know, woo-woo science. But
Okay.
I decided to go anyway because it was so interesting. And that is where, so I became director of research there. And that is where I met Clint Ober. He was doing a presentation. I don't know how he found us, but suddenly he was there doing a presentation on his new research, the only research that was done at the time with a nurse on sleep, the quality of sleep and pain.
Okay.
And it was all self-reporting by, you know, the participant, but at amazing results. And so I said, and he said, just grounding, just like barefoot on the earth does all of these things. It's like kind of amazing, you know, so simple, you know, being educated in science and everything, we have the impression that we know a lot and that every simple things have been discovered.
Yes.
So I was kind of skeptical of saying, well, you know, it would have been discovered 100 years ago if it was true. I mean, come on, you know. But, and I left it at that. It's only later that I found out that actually it was started 100 years ago, even a little more than that in Germany by a doctor called Adolf Just, but that's later. For
Okay.
now, I was skeptical. I was like, well, whatever, you know. And it would have stayed like this if it was not for one of Clint Ober's associates coming to me saying, you know, we want to do a research, you know, would you be open, you know, to do a research if we pay for it? And I said, well, you know, we're kind of open universities to all, you know, different philosophies, and we're not stuck into materialism and stuff. I said, if you're willing to pay, we're willing to do it. So we did the first study. We had outstanding results. To my surprise, I was like, wow, this is interesting. And but still, I had some doubts because I said, well, you know, the equipment is grounded, the person is grounded. We could have grounded loops, whatever.
Okay.
And later we repeated the experiment with equipment that was not grounded, battery powered and everything. We got as good results. And on this one, two of my friends actually with arthritis participated and said, this is better than the medication that I've been taking.
Wow.
So that's when I was convinced. It took about 2 years. But, you know, I was open enough at least to do the research. So, and they were paying for it. So it's like, you know, it's like it was my destiny to be part of this kind of. And so from there on, you know, I'm started to do more and more research for Clint and his company, earthing.com.
Great.
And in 2007, Clint decided to start an institute, the Earthing Institute, which would be dedicated to promoting, earthing, being a repository of all the research that was done, the paper that's are published in there. Also, we would try to support researchers who want to do research. And also, we have this Facebook group, Earthing Insiders, where people can ask questions. They can also ask questions directly to me at info@earthinginstitute.net. So anyway, and we're planning we're planning, a fundraiser. We're planning to expand the capabilities to have, like, for example, certification programs, so that those people who want, to be trained in how to speak and how to help people, because we have, worldwide many distributors that are constantly asking the same questions. So, I think it would be time to do that. And since then, I've been director of the Earthing Institute and promoting research and doing more research. And now we have people doing research worldwide. We have people in Turkey. We had people in Australia. We had a really good group of people promoting earthing in England.
Great.
And another one in India. So it's, it's spreading all over. And now you are in Lisbon.
For sure.
And so I think, this is exciting to be part of this. And I think there's so many benefits. If you look on our website, we have several hundreds, if not 1,000 people testimonials, how they've been helped with all kinds of ailment and problems. But you would find that most of the ailments of the current civilization are inflammation-based.
You're completely right. Absolutely. That is by far. In fact, I saw a stat the other day that not only can we trace a lot of autoimmune diseases to inflammation, but also things like type 2 diabetes.
Yep.
Things like
diabetes,
absolutely,
Alzheimer's,
Alzheimer's, heart disease.
Yep.
So all of the traditional kind of big killers within the West, so cancer, heart disease, diabetes, these are all inflammatory conditions, which is absolutely incredible. I mean, one of the things I appreciate so much about earthing and grounding is that there's a lot of clinical trial, kind of backing it up. It isn't just subjective. Not that subjective patient responses are invalid. They're very, very valid. But the ability to present people with information that is both objective, so this is a clinical trial, and even when we do have subjective patient data, I saw a couple of the trials where, it was randomized. So I would be so grateful if you could just kind of walk us through some of the studies out there. What were their findings, and what conclusions can we begin to draw from some of these studies?
Well, we have a number of outstanding studies. The first ones were about inflammation. So we saw, for example, with Dr. Amalou in thermal imaging, how grounding, earthing was able to decrease acute inflammation that was showing up as redness, on thermal imaging in about 30 minutes.
Wow.
So that was the first finding. Then we went much deeper into that, and we found out that we had some studies done with the Deepak Chopra Center here, who was at the time in San Diego, with Paul Mills, who was the research director for the Chopra Center, and also outstanding professor at UCSD. So we did research going much deeper into, pointing, inflammation physiologically. So we measured like interleukin-6, we measured C-reactive proteins, or all the markers of inflammation. So now, then we have several studies showing that it decreased inflammation. One of also of the early findings was the effect of earthing on the autonomic nervous system.
Great.
So that means on the stress level. So we found out that as soon as a person is grounded, there's a shift in the autonomic nervous system balance towards parasympathetic activation. The autonomic nervous system has two branches, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. And the two branches always like equilibrate each other, and they are antagonistic, but at the same time complementary. So when you need, for example, to, you have a bear coming towards you, you need to run and get all the energy, into the muscle and stuff like that. So that is the flight or fight response, which is controlled by the sympathetic system. Then the sympathetic system becomes activated, the heart rate increases, respiration rate increase, blood flow goes to the muscles so that you can react quickly, to a threat or something like that. The problem is that many people live now in chronic stress, and that when you have this stress and you're not grounded, it stays longer, you get stressed longer. When you are grounded, there is the grounding as the effect of putting you more into a parasympathetic response. And we found out that it takes about between half a second and 2 seconds for this to happen, very quick.
Oh, wow, that's incredible.
So we see a sudden change in the sympathetic parasympathetic ratio towards activation of parasympathetic. So then people can relax. There's some people, for example, that are, they have difficult with digestions.
Yeah.
But you can't digest if you are in sympathetic mode all the time. So you're working, and high speed stuff, and lunchtime, and you go to eat. Oh gosh, I have heartburn, so I'm going to take, some pills, something. The problem is, it's not going to solve the problem. This is not going to solve the problem. The problem of digestion is just because you're not able to relax. So we need to change our environment to give time to people at lunchtime, to relax. I remember, I don't know if it's still there, but in south of France, during a work day, people have 2 hours for lunch, from noon to 2. They were working later till 6 p.m. But I don't think we need 2 hours, but I would suggest like having an hour of lunch would be good, and giving time to get to the. So it has a huge effect on the stress response that people have. So it really calms the mind. It really calms the physiology. So when we say calm the mind, in reality, our mind is everywhere, in our body. And so by grounding ourselves, we calm the physiology and also the mind.
Sure.
The third interesting result is that earthing has a huge effect on the blood. So most people, the blood is what is called a colloidal solution. What that means by that is that it's a liquid with particles in it, just like milk. For example, they are colloidal solution. That's why if you add an acid to milk, you'll see the white stuff, condensing, and you can make cheese and things like that. It's
Precisely.
part of that. Yeah. So the blood is also colloidal solution with red blood cells and white blood cells and platelets floating in there. So what happens is that people not being connected to the earth, they don't have the negative electric charge that the earth is providing. And so what happened is that the cells, red blood cells, lose their electric charge. See, to maintain particles into a solution, in suspension in a solution, they have to be charged. If they are neutral, they will come together, That's why when you take milk is alkaline. So when you put some acid, you neutralize some of this alkaline content. Why is it alkaline? It's because good milk is negatively charged too, so it will give you electrons. It's a good source of electrons. So what happened when we're not grounded is the blood forms, the red blood cells stack up together. They form what is called rouleau formation.
Okay.
And this is very bad because the way that oxygen gets delivered to the body is through very, very small blood vessels called capillaries.
Yes.
They're so small that they are designed for a red blood cell to come through, get squeezed a little bit, and let its oxygen out so that the oxygen goes into the tissue. But if they are clumped together in stacks like this, when they get close, at the entrance of capillary, they're just blocking it.
I see.
So there's no oxygen coming in. So the tissues get deprived of oxygen, and that creates premature aging and a lot of problems.
Through hypoxia, I would guess.
Through hypoxia, yes, of the tissues. Yeah. At the very small level, the level of a red blood cell.
Yeah.
So it's very, very important to have, to be grounded, to have, this, the red blood cells being separated. Dr. Sinatra compare a blood of a person that is not grounded for years to ketchup versus when the blood is grounded, it becomes like wine. It flows so easily. And it causes other cardiovascular problems because now the heart has to pump a liquid that is like the texture of, maybe ketchup is too much, an exaggeration, but really thick texture, and try to pump that through versus having, a fluid that's just like water. Yeah. So it all impacts the cardiovascular system. It has a huge impact on your health. So it's so important, to make sure that, and what people do, like what this cause also is having ketchup blood. It creates high blood pressure. You see, because the pump now, which is the heart, trying to pump very hard and create a lot of pressure. And so you have high blood pressure. And so what they do now, they take blood thinners, like Coumadin and things like that to thin the blood. Well, you should not have had even that problem if you were grounded, all the time.
You're completely right. And it reminds me that we have a lot of diseases now, like glaucoma, like heart failure, which were incredibly rare, 150 years ago. And a lot of exactly. Yeah, no, you're right.
If you go 100, even like 100 years ago, before the 50s, what the doctors were seeing at the time, it was infectious disease.
Precisely.
It was people having, broken legs and things like that. So that's what they were seeing.
Precisely.
They were not seeing people with cancer, diabetes, and things like that.
Exactly.
Things have changed, shift completely.
Yeah, so we're now primarily dealing with chronic diseases, whereas in the past we dealt with acute infectious diseases or acute, fractures, bone breaks, people dying, during childbirth. And you're completely right.
Because of infections, so they didn't know,
Precisely.
I mean, I saw a case, there was a case, the doctors in the 19th century, they would like work on dead people, and then after that, without washing their hands, go and deliver a baby.
Yes, for sure.
Right?
For sure.
So that's what people were dying of, it's like the hygiene. And in fact, there's some research showing that the improvement of hygiene, starting with the beginning of the 20th century, because of technology, it was easy for people to get water with the pipes and everything. That is the main factor of the decrease in infectious disease.
Yes, absolutely, without a doubt.
So
So this predates a lot of the vaccines and things like
yeah,
that.
it
It's
predates the
just
vaccine. Yep.
absolutely.
So we see now that we are in a situation of civilization itself is creating most of the health challenges that people have.
Yes,
And most of it would not be so difficult, if you take children and they play in the dirt and the ground, and growing up, they are always in contact with the earth, it would be amazing. And the women suffer even more than men, because these hormonal imbalance, every woman has that. They don't exist when they're grounded.
I
My
see.
wife went through menopause without absolutely no problem at all. No hot flashes or anything like that. And I know some other women who are grounded, they don't have any of it. And it's just artificially created by the way we live.
I see. You brought up a couple of concepts earlier, which what I would like to do is just kind of explain it for our audience. So, for example, you brought up the concept of a free radical. And just for the benefit of the people out there, so free radicals are unstable molecules that have lost an electron. So they become positively charged, and then as a result, they become chemically reactive. So these molecules then proceed to cause damage to the cell membranes. They can also damage the DNA of the cell, and as a result, they cause inflammation, autoimmune diseases. So in part, that explains diseases such as rheumatoid arthritis, ulcerative colitis, Crohn's, uveitis in particular, anterior uveitis,
Epstein-Barr, all of these things.
precisely. So
Parkinson's.
absolutely. So free radicals are basically caused or the volume of free radicals we're getting, because you can never really stop the body creating free radicals. But what we now have is just an absolute overload of these free radicals. And it's due partly to our environment, partly to our lifestyles. So normally, in normal circumstances, our ancestors would have been able to neutralize these free radicals using antioxidants. So antioxidants are what our bodies use to counter free radicals. They're obtained from our diet, or they're produced in our body, or they're obtained externally through grounding.
Yep.
And I would love, if it's okay, if you could just explain the process by which grounding acts as an electron donor, and then just neutralizes the damage that we would otherwise have from these free radicals.
Yeah, we still have more research for pinpointing the exact mechanism, but I think the papers by Jim Oshman that are on the website are probably the closest to explaining what happens. First, there are parts of the body that seems to be the best. If you're grounded by any part of the body, it's beneficial. But we're designed to have, like, in the hands and especially the feet, they are designed to be in contact with the earth and absorb electrons. So what happens is give a rapid overview. Why the surface of the earth is charged with negative electrons is a complex system that involves the sun and atmospheric weather and stuff like that. Without being too much complex, is that the earth acts like a battery. A battery has a positive pole and a negative pole.
Yes.
And so when you connect the two with like a resistor, or you put like a flashlight or something, then you get light. That's because energy flows. So the earth is the same. It's a battery, with the negative pole being the surface of the earth and the positive pole being a layer of the atmosphere called the ionosphere, which is about 100 kilometers or 60 miles up in the atmosphere. And this layer is very important because it has several functions. One of the functions is to protect us against UV radiation, harmful UV radiation from the sun. And what happens there is that this energy gets absorbed, and it doesn't get to us, except the UVA, the least harmful UV, which actually could be helpful in small quantities. That's another story. But the harmful one, UVB, UV6, they are blocked. The energy is actually used to split molecules of the atmosphere up there, creating positive ions and negative ions. And through a complex atmospheric process that happens in thunderclouds, the charge gets separated. The positive charge goes up, the negative charge goes down. And it's like a Van de Graaff generator. I don't know if you heard about that, but a Van de Graaff generator is a way to generate a high voltage. You know, person, there's a ball there and you touch the ball, and what happens is that your hair stand up because you become so much charge.
Yes.
So a similar process happened inside the clouds, pushing the negative charge down. And at some point, the electric potential becomes so high that you got a static discharge, which is lightning. Basically, lightning is like, you know, when you walk in dry climate, you walk briskly on a carpet and you touch a numb and you get this discharge.
Yes.
Well, lightning is the same phenomenon at a huge scale. So, but what it does, it transfers those negative charge, which are the electrons, basically, into the soil and constantly recharging, you know, the planet. So that's how the planet keeps its electric charge and keeps the sun, energy comes ultimately from the sun. It gets recharged and we evolve in that environment. So we develop mechanisms that are called the immune system that takes advantage of that. What the immune system does is that if we have a bacteria coming into our body, then we have those macrophages, you know, those white blood cells that goes there, and they engulf them and digest them with acids, or they just spit acid on them. But what is an acid? An acid is a substance that lacks electrons, very highly positively charged. And what they do is they steal electrons from like, you know, whatever they are in contact with. Like, for example, you spill, you know, strong acid on a desk, and it seems like it burns the desk, but actually it steals electrons from the desk, and so it just crumbles. So that's the way our system is being designed by nature, and it's not only us, it's all animals, you know. And but what happened, like you were very well described, is that if we're not grounded, we have these free radicals, which are positively charged molecules that are created naturally just by breathing the air, you know. Just by breathing, we're breathing in positive charge. The food we used to eat, you know, before the 50s was like, you know, vegetables from the ground. So they were charged negatively. So they would help us, you know. But the food we're eating today is highly processed, is positively charged, is contribute to increase inflammation in our body. The more it is processed, the more, you know, positively charged they are. So, and also the metabolism itself, you know, create also free radicals. So we have to have a constant mechanism that neutralize them. And if they're not neutralized, the body will try to push them in an area, you know, so that the rest of the body can function. This area become an area of inflammation. And so, and also the body is trying to preserve the function of the organs. So what it's going to try to do is push, you know, those radicals into areas that are not vital for survival, which are, you know, the arms and the legs. So people have a lot of arthritis.
Precisely, the joints, absolutely.
Joints and stuff like that. The body is trying to protect the vital organs because it has this charge. And in some cases, it will put it into a region, wall is off, you know, put much liquid. Why a lot of liquid is try to dilute the charge, you see? So the body is very wise, it's trying all kind of mechanism. And ultimately, what's going to happen is that on the long term, the body will say, well, we can't continue like this. We have to neutralize some of them. So what they're going to do, you're going to try to take electrons from where it's less damaging from the body. Where is that? It's the bone.
Absolutely.
So what's going to happen is people will do osteoporosis. It's a way by, taking electrons from the bones, the calcium is not bound anymore. So the calcium now roam in the body and get deposited in the joint, and all of these things, and can be prevented very easily by being grounded. So
yes, you're completely
that's
right.
the way we're designed, and now we're trying. The body is doing its best, but without having enough electrons, the body is out of balance, and something, depending on your genetic makeup, will give up at some point. You see.
Yes, you're completely right. It's one of the discussions that I have whenever I interact with an individual with uveitis or arthritis. I always say that the pain may be felt in the joint. So in the case of arthritis, or in the case of uveitis, the damage may be done to your eye, but the reality is that you have system-wide inflammation.
Yeah.
And using an eye drop is not going to help the system-wide inflammation. At best, what it's going to give you is it's going to give you temporary relief, but your body still has an issue that you must deal with for your own benefit. And you're completely right. So the inflammation that the body is producing, that the body is just trying to survive and protect the vital organs, that actually leads me to a question, because one of the things that I've noticed with grounding is a lot of discussion around the kidney meridian at KI1. Now, if, for example, an individual grounds at, without that meridian, so for example, if you touch a tree or you use some grounding equipment within your home, the wristband or something to that effect, do we know if we get the same benefit as going through that meridian? Are they equivalent? Can you ground using any part of your body?
Yes, you can ground using any part of your body.
Okay.
The thing is that the K1 is the only acupuncture point on under the foot, on the sole of the foot.
Okay.
And this meridian is a long meridian that goes all around and comes all the way here. And it connects with the urinary bladder meridian, which connects in the back with all the other meridians. So it's able to, so it's a distribution system.
I see.
But it's not the only one. For example, in the sole of the feet, why do we have more nervous termination per square inch than anywhere else in the body? They're just the feet. So they must play a role. Also, the nervous system must play a role. The second place where we have the most nerve endings is in the palms of the hands. The places where we touch most often, the ground. But we have nervous termination. We have acupuncture point all over the body.
For sure.
So, in fact, we found that if you have a region of inflammation, like you have an acute inflammation of an elbow, just place the patch. So Clint will recommend two things: place the patches around the elbow, plus on the hand, and that will quench the inflammation. And by the way, most of the most debilitating pain, the really bad pain, are inflammatory pain.
Certainly.
And they can go away. Yeah, they can go away. Like, for example, rheumatoid arthritis pain. Ground your hands. You'll be amazed. It has an amazing effect on osteoarthritis, rheumatoid arthritis, all kind of arthritis. It's amazing. Because that's exactly what the body needs to neutralize that. So as soon as it gets that, within about 20 minutes, the body is like this autonomic nervous system adjusting, and we found it takes about 20 minutes for the body to say, okay, we have the electrons, and so now we can do some work.
Great.
But it does work. And we have some cases where I remember where I was with Clint, and there were an audience of about 1,000 people, and we were grounding about the 400 of them. I mean, it was like, a wire going through. And Clint was saying, okay, so at the beginning of the talk, wherever you have pain, put a patch there. So people put patch anywhere. Sometimes I have a question, can I put it on my head? Sure, you can. So people were putting patches. And I remember one of the thing I remember is after maybe half an hour, Clint would ask, okay, anybody has a testimonial? What happened to your pain? One guy stuck his hand up and said, I have knee arthritis really bad. I have bad pain there. Put the patch there. 5 minutes, it was gone.
Wow.
5 minutes.
Incredible.
So we have so many stories. I mean, so rewarding, but at the same time frustrating that the word is not going out so much more because it's so amazing.
Yes, you're right. In fact, that segues so nicely into the other question that I have for you. And I'm sure this is a question that's asked often, but does the method of earthing matter? So, for example, is there a difference between, let's say, using an earthing bed sheet, sandals, wristbands, um, you know,
Some method would deliver
okay,
more electrons more quickly than others.
okay,
Okay. But you get the benefits.
mhm,
If you sleep grounded on a grounding mat, you're going to get all the benefits. That's what I do. 8 hours, it's fine. It doesn't have, like, it's not as conductive as a patch, for example. If you
okay,
have acute pain, take a patch and put it there, or a couple of patches, put it there because the patches have the least resistance. They go faster. But you're going to be relieved, it doesn't matter. In fact, the best way to be grounded, if you really want to know what's the best one, naked in the ocean.
Oh, wow,
All the
incredible.
body, because salt water is conductive. It's
Of
coming out
course.
from all sides into your body. I live in a surf town here it's called Encinitas, close to the Pacific Ocean. And I wondered why these people, I mean, the weather, raining, no raining, winter or summer, these people go at early in the morning with their board and they go do surfing.
Mm.
So it just turned out that one of my friends is one of those surfers. Does so good. If I don't do it in the morning, my day is not the same. And now I understand why. Because first, you're grounded by being in the ocean. Then you have the sunshine that gives you vitamin D.
Yeah.
You're breathing negative ions, and
Mm,
you're doing exercise to make sure that all the energy moves at the same time. It's the
mm,
best thing in the world.
mm,
One of the best exercise you can do in the world.
mm. Yeah, that's
So
incredible. It does remind me of when I had uveitis and I was in Guatemala in a very, very small surfing community. And I noticed that the months I spent out there, I didn't get flare-ups. And actually now I now understand because I used to go on these very, very long beach walks, and I would go barefooted. And then in the evenings, I was just going straight into the water, getting a good surf on. But actually, I at the time I'd just assumed the benefits were because I was just in a remote location, I didn't have Wi-Fi signals, but actually I was getting grounded for multiple hours every single day. And it actually does make a lot of sense, which is why one of the things I always say to people is if you have uveitis, you need to ground. Now you need to take it slowly, as I found, you can get a Herx reaction because I did a little
yeah,
bit too much too quickly,
yeah,
but you can absolutely ground every single day, and it's an incredibly potent anti-inflammatory. And best of all, it's just provided to you by nature. There are no drug reactions, there are no side effects, there are no glaucoma to worry about, no cataracts from the steroid medication. So it literally is nature's own medicine. So one of the things you mentioned earlier was some of the frustration which you have, which I also share, that grounding is not yet better known. So I guess I would love, I mean, what do you think it would take for it to become a mainstream healing modality, perhaps in the way that acupuncture is, or, what do we need to do?
Yeah. So it would, I think, it's like, what happened with acupuncture is that what started it, at least in the US, it's because Richard Nixon went to China, and I think one of his associates has some issues, and they did, okay, well, let's try that. So and they did acupuncture on him, and with amazing results. So it came back, and it was, we need somebody with a lot of clout, or a professor at Stanford, or one of those big universities doing a large trial on the benefit of earthing for rheumatoid arthritis.
Yeah.
I mean, they would see amazing results, no problem. They will see results, and just publish that in Nature or something like that. That will go a long way. What we don't have at the moment is that we have an amazing underground movement. People word of mouth, and with what we don't have is that the people or the doctors who are in medical schools and are they are taught a system that actually is the opposite of earthing. It's like medication, this and that. So what we need is like it happened with acupuncture. There were people at UC Irvine did a lot of research, really good research with functional MRI and all of these things. And so it went to NIH, and there were so many people using it, so much benefits that they could not deny it.
Of course.
So we're getting there. So now we need a good clinical trial with multi-center, with in a major university, and that's what we need. I mean, that would be a really, and actually we're working on that right now.
Great.
We're working to trying to get, but what happened is that first, the doctors are very busy.
Yeah.
They don't even have the time to read the new the new discoveries much, and the researchers also have their grant from NIH and institutions that favor certain models of reality.
Yes.
And how we deal with people. So the money flows into certain directions of having new medication, new complex treatments and stuff like that. And so there's the incentive of earthing. What we found is that, well, if they do this research, you cannot have a patent on it, or you cannot have, some ways to make money. It's natural,
Yeah,
our system is not built, towards focusing on what's most helpful to people, unfortunately, but it's focused on a money-making system, what works, but at the same time makes money, you see? If it doesn't work too well, but it makes money, it's much better than something that works well, but we make no money.
Of course.
It's not sustainable. We had doctors saying, but how am I going to survive on this? It's like, so we have a problem there, and I'm not blaming entirely, the medical system. We need money, in order to make things work. So we just need to get. But I think if we get, one or a couple of big things and big research projects, and the words get out, more in mainstream, media and things like that, it's going to have to be repeating, and takes, we know it's going to take time. For example, just to give you an example, I was talking about when in the 19th century, doctors were, working on dead people, and then not washing their hands, and women had a major complication in childbirth. One doctor in those days thought that maybe, it's because of the new theory of microbes by,
Yeah.
Pasteur and stuff. So he said, if that's the case, maybe washing my hands will do a difference. So he started to wash his hands, and he said, I have amazing results. So he wanted to see his other doctors, that was working with him there, and said, I washed my hands and I got, the women are dying much less, they're much better. And the doctor says, this is crazy idea.
Yeah.
What are you doing? It's just like earthing, it's like such a simple, crazy idea. So they were saying, so in fact, the guy who started, and tried pushing that ended up in a mental health institution, because
Yes.
they were pushing him, they were laughing at him, they were ridiculizing him and all that stuff, which happened to Clint also, went to UCLA, they laugh him out. You think, like, if I put a nail in the ground, put a wire around it, and put that on my big toe, I'm going to heal from diabetes? Get out of here. They didn't understand the thing. So, but what happens is that for many years, it took like 20, 30 years, finally, a respectable doctor decided to do a clinical study on that. And he was high ranking, and he published it and stuff like that. And other people pay attention, so they started trying it, meaning doctors, not like the population. And they start having good results. And it took about 40 years for a simple idea of washing your hands might help, the people not to get infected, before it took hold. Now Clint started probably around like year 2000, the first study that I mentioned. We're in the 23rd year, so we know it's going to take some time, but I think we're on track. And in another 10 years or so, 15 years, it's going to happen. But by then, all of us will be retired.
I think you're right, because when I look at a lot of the major medical advances throughout history, patients are pretty agnostic. From the patient's perspective, if something works to benefit you, you're going to do it. And the real problems have been persuading the medical profession to get on board. So, a few that come to mind, one would be the issue of using lemons to prevent scurvy. Tens of thousands of sailors died over literally hundreds of years, and we'd known the cure for scurvy many years. It's just a vitamin C deficiency. But entrenched medical orthodoxy is very, very difficult to kind of break down. I read a quote the other day from the inventor of penicillin, who said, I'm just paraphrasing. He said, I watch my invention that could have saved so many lives just sitting on my shelf because my colleagues will not accept it. And it's the same with all of these other modalities, that the biggest kind of problem almost that society faces is a mentality that is very, very pervasive within the medical sector. So one of the things I just say, look, if you have uveitis, go and ground. Worst case scenario, ground for 20 minutes a day. The worst that will happen is that it won't improve your uveitis. Like it's certainly not going to make you any worse.
No.
Absolutely.
So that's why we say to people, that come, will grounding be effective with, a very rare disease nobody heard about it. So the first thing I do is I go and Google it and see if it's inflammation based, and most of the time it is.
Absolutely.
It's inflammation based, so try it. It should help. But it's like some people have a pacemaker. You say, "Oh, shall I be grounded?" It said, "Would you stop walking on the beach because you have a pacemaker?" I doubt it. So I don't think there's an issue there.
Exactly. I mean, where I'm personally most excited for grounding are a lot of the diseases from low perfusion. So, things like glaucoma, things like, peripheral arterial disease, things like heart failure. Not only
Yeah,
are they just such big killers that they're so debilitating as
they
illnesses.
are.
Yeah.
And we have a case on the Earthing Institute of a guy who healed himself of glaucoma.
Yes, I read that case. Fantastic.
And he made his own thing because he wanted to have that. And I think it's a very good idea. He had this
Yeah.
two metal plate right here in the
Yeah.
inside, and he would ground himself 12 hours a day every day.
Yeah.
He's retired, so he could do that. But he got rid of his glaucoma. It was pretty amazing,
Yes.
especially when I think of my father who had glaucoma, and I didn't know about everything back then.
Yes, you're
But
right. Glaucoma is one of those illnesses, and I think there are a couple of illnesses like this. So I'm not a medical doctor, but I've
me
worked in the
too.
pharmaceutical sector long enough. So I kind of say like, we understand that the model of glaucoma, because glaucoma is kind of purported to be an issue of intraocular pressure, but we know
Right.
for a fact that that just isn't correct because we have things like what we call normal tension glaucoma, where the person presents with 13 or 12 eye pressure, but they still have progressive visual loss. They
Yeah.
still have damage to the optic nerve. So there's a completely new model and a new way of looking at glaucoma where we're now seeing it. It's an issue of perfusion. It's an issue of limited blood flow to the optic nerve, and that's why these patients are losing eyesight.
And that
But
would be caused by inflammation.
precisely, you are completely right. And the capacity for grounding is incredible because if you have less viscous blood, your body has to work less hard to deliver it to a lot of these kind of peripheral parts of the body. So be it the fingertips, be it the capillaries, be it
Yeah.
the delivery of blood and oxygen and nutrients to the eye. So it's just an absolute win-win. And again, you're right. Worst thing that will happen is you enjoy 20 minutes of walking on the beach. And that's
Yeah.
never done anybody any harm. That's therapeutic in its own right.
Yeah, yeah. So some people, oh, I got the metal in my hips, I have hip replacement. Can I ground yourself? Well, it's the same thing. I mean, it's like, it's so yeah. Um well, first of all, I'm so feeling rewarded doing this, helping so many
Right.
people get so many testimonials every day. Almost every day, I have new testimonials that I put into the Earthing Institute. Some people have been helped. Some of them are even saying, I had so much pain, I was suicidal. Thank God,
Wow.
it saved my life.
Mm.
It's like, and Clint one time sent me one of those cases.
Mm.
And he said, Gaétan, because Clint has all the money he wants. He doesn't
Okay.
need any of it. I mean, he made his hundreds of millions of dollars when he was, you know, by selling his company that was making cables for the TV industry. Didn't need this.
Okay.
So, but he said, when you get a case like this, he sent that to me and said, that's why I'm doing this.
Great. Great. I
That's
love
why
it.
I'm doing this.
I love it. In fact, that segues so nicely because the next thing I would love to find out is duration. So you kind of spoke about it a little bit earlier, but I'd love it if we could just kind of maybe just kind of expand that a little bit. Do we know how long we need to ground for the anti-inflammatory effect? So, for example, if an individual can only tolerate, and I've seen this sometimes with people who have Lyme disease, they say a minute at a time. Is that sufficient? Is anything better than nothing? Or is there some optimal grounding time that we need to psychologically aim for?
So there's no universal optimum grounding time.
Okay.
It depends on everybody. If you go back 150 years ago, people were grounded, almost 24/7, and they were sleeping grounded, and everything was grounded. So the amount of grounding become now an issue because people have not been grounded for so many years.
Yeah.
So they have all these inflammatory and all these bacteria, whatever, parasites, everything in their body. And if you kill all of them at once, you're going to be overwhelmed and kill yourself by toxins.
Yeah.
So you have to, from any detox, because grounding when you start is kind of like you're starting a detox in reality. So like all kind of detox, you have, to gauge how much you can do without having too much flare-ups and things like that.
Yeah.
So you start with 15 minutes. So we recommend you start with 15 minutes. If it's good, you don't have any negative reaction or no reaction at all, keep going. Half an hour a day, then an hour a day. The goal, I would say, is that to have it part of your life, the easiest way is to sleep grounded. But you have to build up to be able to be 5 or 6 hours grounded without having flare-ups and all kind of problems. So we're finding in our Earthing Insiders group that many people have had problems for a year. They have to build up to get to a point where they sleep grounded. Some of them say, I start sleeping grounded. I have hot flashes. I have, all kind of things coming up. Has anybody has experienced that? And most people say, oh, of course, yes, we're all like this. Some of them say, I toughed it up and it went away.
Oh, wow. That is one way. Oh, wow, that's
That's
incredible.
one way. Tough it up and it's going to go away.
I did not know that
good.
was an option. My
Well,
approach.
I'm not recommending it because
Okay.
it's risk. The safest one is say, go in and start with 15 minutes. I don't see anybody who cannot ground 15 minutes at the beginning. Ground 15 minutes. If you start having symptoms, just stop. Then the next day, start again 15 minutes. If your symptoms come back, stop. At some point, you're going to be able to build up.
Great.
The body will clear up. You'll be able to do half an hour, couple of hours, and they don't need to be 2 hours in one stretch. You can do like half an hour,
Great.
the same day. So you're making progress. So, but I think the ultimate is to sleep grounded. I mean, the ultimate lazy man grounding system, So I'm having grounding. Also, what I do is I'm going on a sideways a little bit about some EMF stuff. I found that even if I'm grounded 8 hours a day, I have still benefits being grounded when I'm at the computer, like right now. Right now I'm speaking to you, I'm touching a grounding mat that I use as a mouse pad, and at the same time my hands are grounded. I have also a mat at my feet. Now it's too cold. I'm not grounded through there, but I grounded to my hands. So the more grounding, the more benefits. We found that certain conditions like multiple sclerosis, for example, to make real progress where, they really start functioning like normal, they need to build up to about 16 hours of grounding a day.
Oh, wow. Okay. It makes a lot of sense.
It makes, yeah. So the more severe the disease, the more, like if you have Parkinson, what we found with Parkinson people is that when they are grounded, the shaking stop or diminish tremendously. But as soon as they're ungrounded, it starts again. You see? So again, it's an indication that these people have to build up to grounding as much as possible. I would recommend these people to build up to a point where they can ground 16 hours a day.
Nice.
And there's another thing also that's happening. We found out that people who ground every day for a number of time, months and stuff like that, we build up a reserve of charge in ourselves, like a battery. I do this because a doctor, Dr. Andrew Doan, did a research on the effect of EMF. So he went under high power line,
Okay.
and he measured his body voltage when he's not grounded. It was amazing, 17 volts. This
Oh,
is
wow.
really high.
That's
Normally in the
incredible.
house, you would have 1 or 2 volts, building up on your body. That's AC voltage. So when he's grounded, it's almost zero. It was 0.01 something.
That's
Which is good.
incredible. That's incredible.
But he kept grounding, every day for many months. And at some point when he went, we were seeing that the voltage that was being generated on his body was going down. And yet there was no difference. And he repeated that it was of his friend. Whereas high voltage is the same thing, it goes down. So you're building a reserve of electrons. Like Clint, for example, went to Dr. Sinatra has organized a meeting where with a specialist in live blood analysis, so that we would see what grounding does on live blood. It was before the studies. In fact, it is the experiment that actually inspired us to do the research on blood thinning, things like that came up later. But he was experimenting and said, okay, so we're gonna measure the blood of everybody before and after 14 minutes of grounding.
Okay.
So all the people had blood clots, deformity in there, except one, Clint.
Who was
He was not
grounded?
grounded.
Oh, wow.
He was not grounded. He was not grounded. He was coming, in a car. He has not been grounded for hours. Yet his blood was still good.
I see. Which
Why is that? Because it's building up some protection.
Some reserve, absolutely.
Some reserve.
And then also just through grounding that the body has dealt with a lot of the free radicals, and then it's better able to do it. So that does not surprise me.
It's better to repair itself. Yes,
absolutely. Absolutely.
So if you have damage, like for example, we know now from experience that any frequencies below about 100,000 hertz, if you're grounded, you're okay. The body, it will not penetrate, it will not cause damage. So that's why, for example, people thinking about dirty electricity, which is like spikes into the power system.
Yeah.
If you're grounded, don't worry about that.
I
the
see.
One that are still a problem is above 100,000 hertz. These are Wi-Fi, cell phone stuff, all of the things about telecommunications and stuff like that. They go in the megahertz range, TV, radio waves, that are used, like AM, FM. All of these are much higher.
Yeah.
And now 5G is even higher than that. So these are not blocked. They're more like beams, so they penetrate the body. It creates some damage, but the body can repair if it's grounded. So I would still suggest avoidance, or if you can find, if you're lucky enough to find some devices that work.
Right. Like a Faraday
Most of
bag.
the devices out there, like that are sold to protect against EMF, don't work.
Yeah.
So at SciTech Labs, we do research on this, and we found some that works, but I would say 1 in 20 works. So you cannot, you go and see the advertisements. It's very hard to tell which one works. Most of the time that you will see do not work.
For sure.
And I'm still puzzled why it works, because
it's incredible.
This does not block EMF. It does something to change the nature of EMF from harmful to beneficial.
Right.
So lots of research needs to be done on that. But I think Tesla was onto something about this, because he said that he had some beam that could be propagated without attenuation for thousands of miles. And the only way you can do that is by having an electromagnetic field that works in the longitudinal direction, the direction of propagation. And now they're called scalar waves. But I think we lost something at the turn of the end of 19th century and 20th century, believing that electromagnetic fields are only transversal field. Anyways, it's a bit technical, but there's some researchers working into this now and trying to understand that we have to go back to the complete, electromagnetic field theory. Anyway, I think it's going to, in the future, we're going to know how to make all of these high frequencies beneficial instead of being harmful.
That would be wonderful. You mentioned your website earlier. Could you maybe just kind of give out your website? Because I know a lot of
Yes.
people will be very excited to find out more, in particular about the product you just showed there. That looks very, very interesting. I'd love to
Oh,
get that.
this one is at SciTech Labs. It's psy-tek.com,
Okay.
and I'm director of research there. If they are interested in earthing, it's earthinginstitute.net.
Wonderful, wonderful. Dr.
So,
Chevalier, it's been an honor and an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for
you're
the
welcome.
fascinating discussion today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.